Follows to this Q&A panel at Toronto Comic Con. Megan is a beloved Canadian icon with her earliest role as Anne in Anne of Green Gables, and her work since then has included her writing, producing, directing, acting in over 90 productions, including CSI, Law and Order, X-Files, and lately Megan has been burning up the small screen with her roles as Catherine de Medici in CW's Reign, and recently announced in the role of Michelle Earp, the mother of the title character in the sci-fi show Winona Earp. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please join me in extending a warm Toronto Comic Con welcome to Megan Follows, please. That's the awkward phase. Megan, I've seen a lot of interviews with you when people ask you about the evil nature of Catherine de Medici, but she's not really evil, she's more complex. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah. I never saw her as evil at all. I saw her, she makes maybe some questionable choices, for sure. She was such a fantastic character to play. I just felt so lucky to cross paths and to have been in that world of Reign. It was just an absolute blast. And like all good characters, she's multifaceted, she's multidimensional, and she's flawed. She has character defects that makes a character much more interesting to play. And as I always would say about her, she was in that time, a woman in that time, she didn't really have the ownership of her power. And literally, she also didn't have a title. She was came from a merchant family, the Medicis, so she really found her head quite literally on the chopping block several times in her life because she could be replaced. She had no value. Her value was in producing offspring, children that she could then populate the monarchies of Europe with. And so that's a pretty terrifying position to be in. And for many years, she was not able to have children. And then she really was. They were going to get rid of her. And she threw herself at the feet of her husband's father, who had taken pity on her, and basically said she would clean his floors. She'd do anything, please do not dispose of her. And he didn't. He kept her around even though her husband had a mistress, and it was very true, we sort of played this in the show, who he was very much in love with, an older woman by the name of Diane de Poitiers. And so Catherine really was always in the shadow of a lot of things, and she was fiercely, fiercely loyal to her family. Made obviously some and it was very dark times, with the reality of the politics of the times, and fights between the Protestants and the Catholics, and Rome having really the power. So I just loved playing her because she was, that thing they say, hurt people. No, I think it would apply to a character like Catherine because she also really had to put survival above everything else.
It sounds like there was a tremendous amount of research that had to go into preparing for this role. Can you talk a little bit about that?
There was, and then there was only up to a point, because obviously with Reign, we took a tremendous amount of liberties. So anyone who's historical, don't hurt me. So we were really in our own universe with that. But it was amazing to read up about her. Obviously, a very highly intelligent woman, very creative, a huge patron of the arts. And we sort of played with that a little bit in Reign. But she really was very sophisticated. Brought in all kinds of, introduced all kinds of things like the fork, which they didn't have. And perfumes was another huge thing of hers. And just art. She was a very well-educated person. And what I loved about her too, and obviously I have a history of someone playing characters like this with Anne, she was not someone who was a traditional beauty. And so she was in fact really, and Catherine was really considered not that, and people could be quite cruel about that. So she was definitely trying to maintain her position in a pretty harsh world.
What is the source of Catherine's power?
Well, there would be a couple things. She did come from a family that was very wealthy, because they were merchant family, the Medicis, and anyone who's played, there was a series also about the Medicis. So that whole period of time in Italy and the papal states and all of the money and merchants was kind of fascinating, because that was a new way of there being power. It wasn't just related to feudal system and to a monarchy. Obviously, the Pope had a lot of power. So she got her power through that and through her own intelligence and her wits and her need to survive.
About caste dynamics, you bring a lot of experience and a lot of responsibility to the show. And I'm thinking, do you sometimes feel like you're in charge, or do the other characters look up to you in that sort of a mother role?
Well, I was certainly one of the oldest people on it. So perhaps maybe the age gave me a little bit of respect. And such a great group of young actors to work with. I have to say, we were just, Toby Redwell was just incredible, Anna Popplewell, Adelaide Payne, Torrance Coops. They were all really just great spirited. We had, this sort of, a combination. We had a lot of people that were either from Britain, Canada, a few Australians, and then a small number of Americans. And so it really had a wonderful international sense, and people who just really came and wanted to work, come to work and do the work.
Can we get a little excited about the sci-fi announcement? With regards to Winona Earp, I mean, you're playing... Can we get some of that? That's fantastic. How's motherhood going to differ for Michelle and Catherine?
Well, Michelle, it's going to differ because that is a whole new universe to me. So for you Earpers, you know that it's, I'm still learning the rules of that world that I come to work on. Okay, sorry. So the Revenant, okay, wait a minute. Okay, so the portal, wait a minute. Go through the triangle, okay, what's happening? So I too am in a new universe. But Mama Earp is she's a rodeo queen. So I love that. There is a common theme there. She's a queen in her own right. But she's been through some stuff. She's been kind of being re-released into the world. She's also fiercely loyal and protective of her daughters, but she has some fiery daughters too. So that's fun for me to play as well.
Yeah, and that's just such a fantastic show with such powerful, strong women in charge. And it's sort of the same theme with Catherine de Medici. You have women in charge again. But how do you make the transition from that universe to the supernatural universe?
You just jump in. You just jump in wholeheartedly. And I think that's what's so exciting, and obviously for people who are big fans of certain genres, is that you just make these worlds real. They have their own rules, and then once you just accept those rules, and oftentimes those rules are sort of a wonderful metaphor for other situations we're dealing with in a very, I think, more down-to-earth, practical situations. They're sort of worded so beautifully. They're put in a way that actually makes us address issues perhaps that we would be too afraid to look at if we were doing them more reflective of our society.